The Far Cry series is iconic within the gaming community and industry. Predominantly praised for its open worlds and captivating storylines, it has shaped the idea of what open world should be. Titles such as Far Cry 3 are regarded to have amazing gameplay and landmarks, although games like Far Cry 5 are seen as somewhat lackluster to a large portion of the community. However, the Far Cry and gaming community tend to only discuss as far back as Far Cry 2, the game that brought the open world concept to the fore. But there remains a gap at the beginning of us all. Therein lies Far Cry 1, a game of mixed opinions, unusual obscurity, and of course, hours of frustrating deaths. In my eyes, Far Cry 1 is different to the rest of the titles in the series, being developed by Crytek as opposed to being directly developed by Ubisoft. It also happens to not be open world, although it may be good at selling that illusion. I'll split this video into 5 parts. Story, certainly the weakest aspect of Far Cry 1. Environment and graphics. Gunplay and movement. Enemies. And music. It's worth noting that Jarek the Gaming Dragon has already done a video reviewing this game, although I will do my best to cover things that he has missed, or rather, has chosen not to discuss. This video will also be more personal and therefore biased, so if you're looking for a more technical, analytical video on this topic, go watch his review. The story of Far Cry is beyond simple, possibly too much so. You play as an ex-Special Forces soldier named Jack Carver, who has decided to, of all things, run a boat charter business in the South Pacific. Yeah, we're off to a great start. A journalist named Valerie Constantine hires him to take her to a mysterious island in Micronesia and takes off on her jet ski without you. How very selfish. In the meantime, the boat you've worked so hard to purchase and maintain is ruthlessly and utterly destroyed by a lone rocket. I swear to God, this game's story isn't about you being a good guy. It's a revenge story about you losing your ever so precious boat. Anyway, you end up on the island alone, and you find a communication device with a man on the other end named Doyle, who is essentially Far Cry 1's Cortana. He'll guide you through the game and tell you many things. Turns out that Val wasn't a journalist and was instead sent to help you, or force you, to take down Dr. Krieger, who's mutating primates and eventually humans into aggressive and dangerous creatures known as Trigens. The voice acting is bad, the story is bad, and the cutscenes are laughable. Is that motion capture? Bad move on models with less polygons, and I have brain cells after witnessing this monstrosity. It's not good. But that's okay. Personally, I'm not a hugely story-motivated person, and if the game's mechanics are good, in general, I'm willing to make the sacrifice of a terrible story. Thankfully, this is where Far Cry makes a comeback. The environments in Far Cry are pretty beautifully crafted, and honestly, compared to other 2004 games, are some of the most impressive, particularly outdoors. The gorgeous blue waters and rolling green hills in particular stand out from the dreary, dark, foggy environment you'll encounter later. The water effects of the time have to be praised as well. They have rather convincing wave and splashing effects. Many of the locations, to myself anyway, are quite memorable. The mercenaries' outposts, the misty forests, and the scorching volcano. From a distance, this game looks really good graphically speaking. However, as you look at weapon and NPC models, you'll notice somewhat low resolution textures and blocky models. They aren't awful by any means, and one would expect them from a 2004 game, but Far Cry as a whole looks better from afar. This was probably done intentionally. By focusing on the large-scale environments, the game gives the illusion of a large open world. Don't be deceived, this game is not open world. True, many encounters may be approached from many different angles, and you can walk some distance into the tropical rainforest, but the game is linear. You have a set path to walk, and you won't have a choice. That's possibly the main reason that people tend not to talk about Far Cry 1. Many people are in the community for Far Cry's vast open worlds, and when approaching the first game, they are greeted by what becomes abundantly clear is a linear shooter. However, in my opinion, this doesn't detract from the experience of Far Cry 1. It may simply be different from what one may come to expect. Although it's easy to give credit to Far Cry 1's well-crafted and recognizable environments, I do have issues with them at times. In particular, these damn corridors. Multiple chapters in the game are just buildings with narrow corridors and dangerous close-quarters encounters. Without any greenery, much of the stealth aspect is eliminated entirely, instead relying on both basic shooting skills and a hefty portion of luck. The lack of open skies doesn't help the game graphically either. As I mentioned earlier, distant viewing is what Far Cry 1 excels at. In these rusty corridors, the full impact of low-resolution textures and models is demonstrated all too well. Another problem I faced is that the environments have a habit of not helping combat flow at all. Hiding in a bush, there's 3 enemies behind you. Inside a building, don't worry, 500 enemies will flood the door. Rounded a corner, here's a little gift. It feels as though no matter what angle you come from, enemies will find a way to take you by surprise. The environment simply just does not lend itself to combat, particularly when there are a large number of targets. However, this is something that can be dealt with over time, as you can adjust to this unusual way of playing. It's a nitpick in the grand scheme of things. This is where Far Cry 1 excels. Every single weapon in Far Cry is fun to use, no word of a lie. A combination of excellent sound design, well-crafted mechanics and appropriate recoil makes them simply fun to use. The Deagle is simple but elegant, and my god, its sounds are just so punchy. The AR is always a firearm to fall back on, lovingly reliable. The jackhammer shotgun, which I have yet to understand the mechanisms of properly, is just, oh my lord, it's the best thing ever. I never get bored of these weapons, simply because of how goddamn fun they are to use. What's unusual is that the weapons, many of which have them modelled, fail to ever use iron sights. Instead, right-clicking will zoom in slightly and improve accuracy. A few weapons use scopes, but these are the exceptions. I'm sure that many people dislike this system. As a matter of fact, they do. So much so that someone designed a whole mod just to add proper iron sights to the game. But personally, I quite like the current system. It takes a bit of time to fully zoom in, and during that period that you are zoomed in, your sensitivity and movement speed is reduced, as you'd expect from iron sights. But, because of the delay that is present before being fully zoomed in, you need to be tactical about where you do it. Gone are the days of, oh look, there's an enemy, use iron sights. This system should be utilised when you have the element of surprise, to get improved accuracy and hopefully take out a few enemies before they start to retaliate. In combat, it should not be used in close quarters encounters. It's supposed to be used when you have the upper hand, or at least, that's my interpretation. It does exactly what it needs to do, and I like it. Hear me out for a second though, this game is so hard. It's like you have less health than half the enemies you face, and their bullets whistle away that poor red bar faster than I'd enjoy. I played this game on medium difficulty on my first playthrough, and I died more than I care to admit. And you will too, don't you worry! Jack Carver's screams shall echo within your mind for decades to come. Not to mention that there are 3 difficulties higher than this. 3! The difficulty of this game is outrageous and at times just frustrating, but it does certainly provide a challenge. My opinions of the movement are mixed. Your base walking speed is quite slow and only gets slower depending on the weapon you hold. I'd like to talk with the smart guy who thought putting Counter-Strike mechanics into a game like this was a good idea. You can lean around corners to shoot at enemies to avoid getting hit, although honestly I use this like twice during the entire game. Then again, I'm guilty of often not using all movement options available to me, so that one might just be a me thing. Possibly the worst part about the movement is the stamina meter that's used up incredibly fast and refills slower than Duke Nukem Forever's development time. Swimming, sprinting and jumping all use up this meter, and it just does not suit the game. It's unfortunate, but not game breaking, and the gunplay carries everything either way. There are 2 main kinds of enemy within Far Cry 1. The Marines are the only enemy you face for around a third of the game. They say some stupid things, have some stupid ragdolls, and are generally fun to fight. Their AI isn't incredible by any means, but they're a fun opponent to fight nonetheless. I needn't say too much about them, they're a pretty standard simple enemy. Where things get interesting are the Trojans. The Trojans, apart from hulking horrendous, are modified primates and humans that have had every muscle and organ in their bodies enhanced, at the cost of heightened aggression and a severe lack of intelligence. They also have an annoying habit of sneaking up and jumping at you with absolutely no time for you to react. That's the inherent problem with the Trojans. Half the time, a death to a Trojan is an unfair one. Seriously, the guys who designed them have never played the game or something. It's not fun, it's not intuitive, and it gets old real quick. Things don't get any better when you encounter the fat boys. They're just bullet sponges with rocket launchers whose heads get knocked back when you shoot them. It's funny looking though. Generally, the enemies in Far Cry 1 are fun to fight, but often unfair and not particularly unique. This is a part of Far Cry 1 that I see no one ever speak about, and that's the soundtrack. It's less music than it is ambience. And in my eyes, that's a good thing. It really manages to complement the gameplay well. But when I look back at these ambient noises, I feel a strong tug of nostalgia. A deep burning in my heart. A fire of passion and... Jesus Christ, that noise triggers PTSD. These pieces are dynamic. When you're spotted by hostiles, the music changes and becomes far more upbeat and threatening. The ambience complements the game incredibly well, and I feel as though people don't give it enough credit. It just solidifies this game so well, and I love it. All in all, there are many things wrong with this game. It feels more like a tech demo for the Cry engine more than anything else, and there are plenty of reasons to dislike it, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't just incredibly fond of it. I've pointed out everything I dislike about it, but you'd be surprised at how little else annoys me. I really enjoyed this game, and I think if more people gave it a chance, they would too. So, go ahead, give it a try, and maybe you'll like it.